In this episode, you're gonna discover how I use my calendar for maximum productivity and why time blocking and batching are non-negotiables for your best time management. And last but not least, you're also gonna learn how I make sure that I don't get the Sunday scaries and how you can make sure that you wrap up your Fridays so that you're always planned ahead for the next week. Hello, and welcome to the Fast Forward Amy Show, the show where we talk about how you can lift your life and business with simple strategies. I'm Fast Forward Amy, your host and coach, and I'll bring you a new episode every Tuesday. I remember back in university when I was sitting in class with my laptop that a lot of other students would be looking at me and looking at my laptop and they were like, "What do you use for your calendar? Which app is that?" And I was always amazed. And I was like, this is just iCal. I just color-coded my iCal and it was like a coloring book. I kid you not. There was so much in there and I color-coded it for my work, for my business, for my private stuff, for my health, for school. And I kind of tripped other people up, but they were always really interested in how I did that. And to this day, I still get a lot of questions about this every time someone sees my calendar or they ask me like, how do you get so much done? Because guess what? Everyone sucks at time management. And so do you, and so do I, because we actually can't manage time. We can only manage ourselves. So today I'm gonna share my top 10 tips that I wanna share today with you right now about your calendar, because I've done episodes about time management in the past, but as I just said, you can't really manage your time. So I'm just gonna look specifically at how I use my calendar to optimize my workflows, my days, and all of that. I have 10 tips, so I'm gonna go through them chronologically. The first one is to color code your calendar. So in my iCal, for example, that's also linked to my Gmail. I gotta say there's a lot happening there, but I still kind of refuse to use Gmail for everything, and I still use my iCloud for a lot, to the great sadness of my team, because they're always like, what are you doing and when? And then I have like awkward stuff to put in there and I don't want them to see it, or maybe they just see everything. It's like Amy has a gynecologist appointment and everyone sees it, but okay. I give my team full access to my calendar so they really know what's up and when. And how I arrange my own color coding is that, for example, I have one that is called health, and everything that is workout or coaching related I put in green. That is my health, green for like good stuff. Then I have one color-coded thing for everything that is just me working proactively on stuff. So that's my own creating, for example, prepping podcasts, or basically anything that is for me strategic, proactive work where I'm not actually talking to other people. This sounds really rude, but I have a different color coding for whenever it's meetings and stuff with other people, because for me, I know that I really enjoy my me time and then I need my thinking time, but I also know that obviously I need to meet with my team and talk to my clients in coaching calls. But when I know, for example, when my iCal is too purple, because that's everything that's meeting related, I know that I'm probably going to be really tired and I need to make sure that there are some other spots that I really block in my calendar, because I know other parts are going to be really social. So I use the colors to kind of give me an overview of what I'm doing when and where. My second business, Alpha Vrouwen, also has a different color in my calendar. There I don't have like other color coding within the color coding. It's just everything that's related to Alpha Vrouwen, so I can see what's going on there and which meetings I have. The color coding, basically you can't, it's actually, you gotta create different, what's it called? I don't know, calendars, different calendars in your calendar to be able to do that, and you can just assign colors. I do all of it just within the iCal app, and then I have the same on my phone, and it's really helpful. It also means that at the end of the week, for example, I can just have a look at my calendar for the next week and I can see like, oh yeah, what's happening this week? Oh, there's a lot of podcast recordings. Okay, whoa, it's gonna be a heavy week. Then I can tell my partner like, hey, this is a very like socially heavy week, so I'm probably gonna be tired. And then my own coach would tell me like, if you're doing a lot, probably you also need extra me time, so maybe I will schedule in some extra self-care. I will make a note to myself that I'm having a bath on Monday night, which would go into the health and self-care section. That's kind of how I do it. Ideally, you would schedule in your health stuff first and then the other stuff. So that's color coding your calendar. Secondly, I just touched on it. It's all about time blocking your calendar. So what I do, for example, is I will know that I need to work proactively on content. So I will make sure that there are time blocks for meetings or for content or for coaching. For example, Thursdays is always coaching for me, or CEO days where I just work proactively on the business. That is time blocked, and everyone also kind of knows that they can't touch anything on a Thursday in my calendar. On the other hand, I will time block meeting time with my team so that they can schedule meetings with me. And that brings us to the next tip, which is actually all about batching. Time blocking and batching go hand in hand because you can't really batch if you're not time blocking. For example, a full day of podcast recordings is where I batch anywhere between 4 to 8 podcast episodes, which is a fully blocked day where I'm just doing all the stuff so that I don't have to do it every week. I remember back in the day, I was recording podcast episodes every Monday, just like in my sweatpants, just like looking, and I'm like, oh no, I still have to record a podcast. Sometimes it would be Monday afternoon, and on Tuesday, everything from the podcast had to go live. So that was really heavy, and it felt like I was just podcasting all the time, and I was always just losing the race with the clock. And I continued to do that until I started batching. And what really helped me with batching the podcast was actually making sure that I hired a videographer, or you can also hire someone for audio only, but it's always nice to have the video files, so that I was actually I really had to batch my podcast episodes because I didn't fully trust myself to do it otherwise. So that's really helped me gain a lot of time, because spending an entire Monday afternoon every week versus spending one day every 8 weeks on creating podcasts, huge difference, and my team loves that too. So batching and time blocking can also be used for your clients. So for example, a lot of coaches have these huge time slots set up, or like hairdressers or anyone with a service, basically. They have these big calendars with like all of the different time slots, and clients can just book in time whenever, because they're afraid that if they don't offer all of the options, people aren't gonna book a call slot with them or like a time slot. But let me tell you a little secret. When you have an online calendar or something like it, and you have blocked your time, and you're like, those are evenings where we can work together, those are mornings, but it's not midday, then no one is going to book in the midday slot, and they will find a way to move something else around, like stop work sooner, or free up an evening, or get a babysit, whatever, to work with you in those other time slots. That doesn't mean that you have to make it impossible for your clients to book time with you, because obviously, especially when starting out, you want to make sure that you offer them as much of your, as many opportunities as possible. But you also want to make sure that you can offer the quality you want to deliver to people. And that means that you gotta navigate your own energy and time in order to be able to perform at your best for them. And when you say, hey, this is the calendar that works for me and it's gonna work for your clients, and you put a hard limit on that, they will figure out a way to book within the slots that you're providing for them. So time blocking and then batching is huge. Batching is also something, for example, just for your Instagram posts, for emails, all of that stuff. Let's say I'm launching something and I'm writing a ton of emails for the launch, then that would mean that I can just every day look at oh no, Friday we need to launch another email, and then I'll be writing that email, and then the team goes and implements it, and then the next week is oh, Amy, we're still missing 2 emails, and then I write draft for 2 emails, and there's so much work. The best thing I could do is just write all of the emails at once, or even better, I actually just give pointers as to how we need to write the emails, and then my copywriter helps me out with the emails. If I do all 6 emails at once, that's far better than if I would be doing 2 emails every week, because I'm losing time getting in the flow, I'm losing time looking up what I had to do, losing time looking up the information. Doing 6 at once is just way better. I would want to challenge you to create 30 Instagram posts in one day. I'm certain that you could do it. If you could just divide it up, it's 30 posts, that would mean 10 tips, 10 things about my team or my personal life or the behind the scenes of my business, and then 10 quotes. I'm certain if you divide it up like that, you can do it. By the way, I have a brainstorm training on content. You can find it on the website. It's about how you can brainstorm all of the different types of content you can make. So definitely go and check that out. I'll make sure it's also linked in the article of this podcast episode. And by the way, this is podcast episode 85. I guess that means we're nearing the 100 episode mark. And that means through fastforwardamy.com podcast.com/85. You can find all of the resources and extra trainings I'm mentioning. Okay, where were we? We had color coding, time blocking, and batching. And really, you really need to start batching. I swear to God, it's kind of like meal prepping, but then for your business. We all know we need to do it, but we're not doing it. But you will love it when you did it, okay? You'll get so many more results and you'll be able to put out so much more content or packages or offers, whatever. Next up is our tasks. So I have this thing, if it's not in my calendar, it doesn't exist. My team knows this too. I live and breathe by my calendar. My brothers kind of get annoyed by it. Sometimes they're like, oh, there's no room for spontaneity. But I'm like, there is room to do fun stuff. I just like to plan it in. I'm a little bit of a planner. I'm not saying I'm always so good at it because I definitely struggle with my planning and time management too, as I'm sure we all do because our life and business keeps changing. So the way we need to manage everything also keeps changing. But when I write tasks for myself in my calendar, so the way I work is I don't have a huge to-do list because when I have a huge to-do list, that is actually a sign that something is wrong, that I'm not batching things, that I'm just doing all kinds of things all the time, and I have a lot of switch time, which means that you're switching back and forth between things a lot. So for example, let's say I need to prep podcast recordings. I will create a buffer block in my calendar, and I would just write down in my proactive working calendar that I need to prepare 7 podcast episodes that will go live between like the 15th of July or June and end of July. Just saying something. So I will make my task really specific and I'll be like, prep the outline for 7 podcast episodes. And then when I look at my calendar, for example, at night, at the end of my workday the day before, or at the beginning of the week, I can be like, okay, so I'm doing that. And I can see it all week long, like I'm doing that then. So I'll already write down some ideas. When I see something happening, I'm like, oops, oh yeah, I had that. I will start writing down stuff on my whiteboard. And when the time comes and I have that buffer block, it's fairly easy for me to do it because I'm already mentally prepared, as well as the fact that it's very action-oriented. It doesn't just say podcast. And this might feel like it's so redundant to word it like that, but I kind of force everyone on my team to do it like that too. I'm like, you need to make all of your tasks action-oriented. So like outline 7 podcast episodes, edit 7 podcast episodes, or like think of 7 subjects. So thinking of 7 subjects would be different than actually outlining the 7 episodes. So that would be actually different tasks in my calendar spread out throughout the time so that by the time we get to the podcast recordings, I'm prepped. So for me, that could be think of 7 podcast subjects, outline the 7 episodes, and then it could also be like plan out which episode will air when. And those could be 3 different things that are in my calendar throughout like 2 weeks' time. I could do it all together, but it might be more inefficient for me because then I would have to go from being creative to actually thinking about planning. And those are different sides of my brain that I need to use for that. So I try to just like not do it together. And whenever I've done something like it, because sometimes it's also like an urgent payment or I need to call someone back, I'll also just put it in my calendar. And when I did it, I will put a little okay before it. So no longer do I use a ton of to-do lists and stuff like that. I'll just be like, okay, I did that. So it'll be like, call Laura. And then afterwards it'll be like, okay. And I'll just put it in the name of the task before the task. I still also have some task and project management things, but then, for example, for me, it would be more that my big task is in my calendar, and then in my task or project manager, I could go and find all of the information that I need in order to execute it, but in my calendar, it says exactly what I need to do. I never start my day not knowing what I need to do. What's also really important when you are inputting your own tasks into your calendar is that you really look at the real time it takes for you to accomplish all of that. So a lot of people will be like, everything in a half-hour block, but it actually takes 2 hours. Or you will input 2 hours time and then you will take 2 hours for it, but the first hour you spent actually procrastinating because it doesn't have to take that long. I can prep podcast episodes in 2 hours or in half an hour, you know? So make sure that you actually don't just put a bunch of things in your calendar as tasks, but actually make it like events with yourself, meetings with yourself where you input the actual time it will take you. And sometimes I'll also use the notes function in my tasks so that I have a few notes. For example, it could be like call back Laura, for example, and be like, don't forget to say that she has to look at this one thing. I could add that in my notes. So I don't know, sometimes I'll be in the car and then I'll have to do a call. And then beforehand, I could look at like, oh, was there a note I needed? So that I don't end up with a bunch of post-it notes and stuff. I'll just input it in the event itself. Okay, so we had color coding, time blocking, batching, tasks, and now we come to travel time. Travel time is one of the functions that you can use in your calendar that I don't think a lot of people use. And I've definitely come across some problems not doing that, where I'm like, oh, I'll have a massage at 6, and from 5 until 6 I'll have a meeting. No. So either you make a separate event that's like get ready to go somewhere, or you can actually use a travel time function in your tasks. You can just like turn it on and be like, okay, it will take me 30 minutes to get there. Now when I'll host a webinar or something, for example, I'll sometimes use that travel time function as a getting ready function because I don't want to overpopulate my calendar. I'll just be like, that half an hour is just a spot where I can't put another meeting or whatever for my webinar, and I'll use it to do my makeup and get dressed, for example. So the travel time function is definitely something you could use more. You can even use it to get ready for your evening. So I know for me especially, it's difficult working from home because there's no commute to the kitchen, but it could be like, I don't know, if you want to put cooking in your calendar and create a hard limit for yourself that you put like half an hour in there, that's like, you can't work anymore, but you're not cooking yet, but you're gonna take a shower and put on homeware or something and like get out of your work zone. That could work. Which brings me to, don't put stupid stuff in your calendar. And I have definitely been at the point in my life where I was like, I'll put everything in there. Shower, go to the store. Almost to the point of putting like pee in there. I never did that though, but I would start overpopulating it, be like, shower, get ready, all of that. Gotta say, when I'm super stressed, I will try to get even more of a grip on my planning, which is basically a good thing. But if your calendar is super overwhelming just looking at it, then something needs to go, or you're doing it wrong, or like something is off. So don't put everything in there. Make sure that you actually batch some stuff together. Maybe there's a bunch of tasks concerning one topic, like prepping a podcast, and put those different things in the notes, for example. Obviously, you could be using a task manager for that, and I definitely also use that. But for this, it's more relevant if you just want to use your calendar. And I think, honestly, aside from projects, for like a launch or something, it's good to keep like a one-pager about it. But for the longest time, I just did it with my calendar and an Excel sheet, and it works just fine. Because if you're always creating more and more to-dos, it actually means that you're being too busy being busy and not busy being productive. Okay, so we had the don't put stupid stuff in there or you'll get overwhelmed. And now we're on to our appointment scheduler. I used to have an appointment scheduler set up in a time block for my clients so they could book appointments. I used to have that for my coaching clients as well. I would time block like 2 half days a week where they could book appointments with me, and I would just like batch through them, you know? So it's a time block where I would batch through them, and I would use an appointment scheduler so we didn't have to do the, hey, when's a good time for you? When's a good time for me? All of that, and just be like, hey, here's a link. You can schedule an appointment with me. And I would add a form so that they would always have to be prepared before they came to the call, because I didn't want my coaching calls to be just like whining. I wanted them to take ownership of what they wanted to get out of the call, and so that I could prepare for that call, you know? And now I do the same with my team. We have a weekly slot of like an Amy meeting, and they can book in a call with me that's anywhere between like 10 to 55 minutes. And they can fill out the questions, be like, hey, this is the situation I'm in, this is the question I have, these are the possible solutions I see. And because they do it like that, I'm not caught off guard by a million different questions from my team all the time, because either they would be asking me questions in a project meeting, or they will ask me questions at that given time, but it prevents me from just getting a bunch of random phone calls all the time, or emails or Slack messages, you know, because they have a clear spot where they can go, and I can manage my time efficiently because they know they always have a safe space to land every week where they can actually book a meeting with me. And because I provided that, they actually needed a lot less than what it might have seemed like before doing that. I use Acuity for that. If you want to give Acuity a shot, I think you can get a free trial through my affiliate link, which means that I might get a commission if you end up using it. Don't worry, I only recommend stuff I use myself. And the link is fastforwardamy.com/Acuity, and I'll link it in the article of this episode as well. Okay, we're almost there. I have 3 more tips. The next tip is that you want to create a buffer for yourself. Now, this buffer could be, for example, when you start out with freelancers or with a new coaching program or with a launch and you just don't know how to look at how much time you actually need for things, so that you just put a buffer block in your calendar. A while back, I think it's about a year ago, I just noticed building my team that there was a lot of stuff I wasn't planning in and I was underestimating, so I just started building in 2-hour buffer blocks, either in the morning or in the afternoon. And it might seem like a lot, but it really helped me to get a grip on what was going on and to actually structure it then. Right now, I don't use a buffer anymore, but if you are being short in time every day, it might help to just put a temporary buffer in your calendar. And for me, I now have that in the shape of turnaround time, which is my next tip. Is in the space I'm in my business right now, I need a lot of turnaround time, meaning I need to give a lot of feedback to my team members. I need to review a lot of visuals and text because we're all working on the Fast Forward Amy brand, and that's a lot of stuff that's in my head alone. It's like there's a lot of post-its in my brain and no one knows what's written on the post-its or that the post-its even exist. And it's only when I see something that I can review it and be like, hey, think of this, because that's how I would do it. So giving feedback to my team, reviewing copy, podcast episodes, articles, visuals takes up a lot of my time. So I have this 1-hour block of turnaround time in my calendar every day. And as I am executing less and strategizing more, there's more and more that needs to be reviewed by me. So the better my preparation for a podcast episode, the better the copywriter can run with it. And the longer you work together and the more feedback you give, the less time it will take to review. But then there's a new project and then there's new review time. So for me, that has shifted a lot. And it also means, checking in Slack, checking in my coaching groups. That's stuff I need to do every time, but I'm not going to make a bunch of different tasks in my calendar to do it, nor am I going to add it to my task list every day, my project managing tool or my task manager, because then I'll get super overwhelmed. But it's just a list of a few things I need to do every day, so that can be done in that turnaround time. And maybe checking Slack only takes 5 minutes for each business and team, and checking my email as well, because my assistant does most of that. I actually don't use email, by the way. That's not included in this episode, but I fucking hate emails. Never email me, please. It's literally, you won't. Also, I'm the most unreachable person on the planet. I don't know if you know that. The best way to reach me is to call me. And I never give anyone my phone number, so it doesn't happen. I have this auto reply on my email and it just says if anything's urgent, give me a call, but I didn't include my phone number. So it kind of means that if people actually want to give me a call if something was urgent, they would have already had to have been in my inner circle. So I guess that's funny. I just don't want to have a bunch of different communication channels, because then my turnaround time would take a lot longer. See what I did there? So for you, your turnaround time could be checking in with your clients, for example, or it might be that you're just making packages every day. Just the recurring stuff, make sure that there's one block that you just do all of that in. And if you are in a business where you can't afford to take an entire day before you respond, maybe do that twice a day or multiple times a day. And also use autoresponders and stuff like that to actually communicate it to people and tell people where they can reach you. Because probably Slack, I will check multiple times a day. And then my last concrete tip before I wrap it up is actually placing hard limits on yourself. And I don't mean that in a dirty way. I just mean if you really want to stop work at 6, then you need to stop work at 6. And then it might help if you put something else on there, like going for a walk or cooking or taking a shower. Preferably you would put something in your calendar that you actually enjoy, so that by then I need to do that. Now, I'm not the best at this, so I recently asked my personal trainer to come at the end of the day instead of the beginning of the day, so that I had a hard stop a couple of times a week, so that I had to stop working. And at the same time, we also, just the team and I in Fast Forward Amy, we decided that we really didn't want meetings to run longer than 5 o'clock, and preferably we would finish meetings at 4 o'clock. Ever since we made that decision, we were able to drastically cut down our meetings and put them earlier, and no one is just booking them at 6 p.m. anymore, unless we work with you as consultants. And there will always be exceptions, but sometimes you just gotta make a decision to go for it. And that could have to do with the hard limits. For me, that also meant deciding that I wasn't going to be doing evening coaching calls anymore, because I don't want to be doing any coaching calls after 5 p.m. And that means that I have now designed my programs to fit into that, and it will be a rare day where I will go live or do a coaching call at night. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up, but I also have something else I want to tell you before this. So I'm just gonna quickly go through all of the tips and know that you can find all of these through fastforwardamy.com/85. And before I wrap up and tell you more, know that I also have a time checklist. So this was specifically about your calendar, but I actually have a much broader checklist of my 10 best time management tips that you can start applying right away today. And you can find it through fastforwardamy.com/time checklist. And it's also linked in the description below this episode. So that means if you're listening to the podcast, you can just like grab your phone and look at it. And if you're watching on YouTube or IGTV, there's links here, okay? And you can find everything always on our website through just clicking the podcast tab, and there's the tab. There's a bunch of recaps there. Okay, so we had color coding, time blocking, batching, tasks, travel time, don't put stupid stuff in your calendar. We had appointment schedulers, we had buffer time, turnaround time, and hard limits. But what I really want to talk about is the Friday night phenomenon, where on Friday, you probably have a bigger to-do list than you had at the beginning of the week, and you might not really have made a plan for the next week. I highly recommend that you always just, whenever you have stuff you need to do, you immediately give it a spot in your calendar, because that makes sure that at the end of your Friday night, you can be like, okay, have some open loops, I'll give them a spot in my calendar. You have a really good view of what's possible and what not, and it will also help you when people ask you a question that you can actually tell them, no, I'm busy then, so that you can actually say no instead of just taking up a bunch of stuff that you don't have any time for. So I like to give everything a spot in my calendar on Fridays, and it might be that there's a bunch of different tasks that I'll put in my task manager or my project managing tool, but then I will put a block in my calendar where I'm actually working on that stuff. And for me, a lot of time that involves either like making a launch plan or, for example, writing copy or stuff like that. You want to plan ahead. You want to know what's coming up next week. I will never finish a week not knowing what's coming up the next week. And that also makes sure that I don't have to work on Saturdays. On Sundays, I don't have to work either. And on Sunday night, I will probably just have a look at my calendar and be like, oh, what's coming up tomorrow? Or like this week. And then I know, and I don't have to start planning it in, and then I don't have the Sunday scaries. So make sure that on Friday you plan ahead and you know what's up next week, and preferably the couple of next weeks. And know that you can't manage time, but you can manage yourself. This was episode 85 of the Fast Forward Amy Show, and I'm Fast Forward Amy, your host, and I hope to see you again for a new episode next week, Tuesday.